AITA for leaving my wife the moment I found out she was pregnant. I, 34M, have always been 100% certain that I never wanted kids. It wasn't something I was unsure about, not a phase I thought I would grow out of. I knew deep in my core that fatherhood wasn't for me. It wasn't just the sleepless nights or the endless responsibilities that terrified me, though that played a part. It was the entire lifestyle that came with raising a child. The financial burden, the emotional exhaustion, the way people I knew lost their sense of self the moment they became parents. I watched my older brother go from a carefree, adventurous guy to a constantly exhausted, stressed-out shell of himself after he had his first child. I saw my friends give up their passions, their ambitions, and even their relationships as they threw themselves into parenthood. I knew that wasn't what I wanted. And because I was so certain, I made sure to be brutally honest with every woman I dated. When I met Rachel, 32F, we clicked instantly, and from the very start, I made sure we were on the same page. I told her outright that I had no desire to ever be a father, and if she wanted kids someday, then we simply weren't compatible. She reassured me, over and over again, that she felt the exact same way. She told me she had never had maternal instincts, that she had zero interest in the stress and sacrifices that came with parenting. She said she wanted a partner, not a co-parent, and that she loved the life we had built together, just the two of us. For 7 years, I believed her. We created a lifestyle that reflected that choice, one where we never had to consider children in the equation. We traveled the world, went on last-minute weekend getaways, stayed out late without worrying about babysitters or responsibilities. Our home was a place of peace, not one filled with screaming kids and endless chores. We built a dynamic that worked perfectly for us, and anytime someone asked when we were finally going to settle down and start a family, we would exchange a knowing look and laugh. We were happy, so damn happy, just the way we were. And because we had talked about it so many times, I never once worried that she would change her mind. I thought she was as committed to this life as I was. That's why, when she sat me down one evening, fidgeting with her hands, avoiding eye contact, I had no idea what was coming. The tension in the air was thick, but pregnancy wasn't even a remote possibility in my mind. I figured she had bad news about work, or maybe she was upset about a family issue. But then she took a deep breath, placed a hand on her stomach, and whispered the words that would shatter my entire world: "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." For a moment, I felt like I had misheard her. My brain refused to process what she had just said. Pregnant? My wife, the woman who had spent years reassuring me that she never wanted children, was suddenly telling me we were going to have a baby? I stared at her, waiting for some kind of follow-up, a nervous laugh, a confession that this was some kind of prank. But she just sat there, her eyes filled with expectation, like she was waiting for me to sweep her into my arms and tell her how excited I was. I couldn't speak. My heart pounded in my chest, and a sinking feeling settled deep in my stomach. This can't be happening. This wasn't supposed to happen. I swallowed hard and forced myself to ask the only question that mattered: was this an accident? I needed to hear her say that it was a mistake, that this wasn't something she had planned, that fate had simply thrown us into a situation neither of us wanted. But instead of giving me the reassurance I so desperately needed, she hesitated. She hesitated for too long. Her eyes flickered with guilt, and I knew. I just knew. My hands clenched into fists as she finally admitted, in a small, uncertain voice, "Not exactly." I could feel my blood turn ice cold. That hesitation, that 1 second of silence before she answered, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some unfortunate mistake. This was a choice. A deliberate decision she had made without me. My mouth went dry as I forced myself to ask, "What do you mean, not exactly?" She sighed, avoiding my gaze, and started mumbling about how she'd been thinking about it for a while, how she realized she actually did want to be a mother, how she was afraid to tell me because she knew how I felt. And then came the final blow, the words that solidified just how deeply she had betrayed me. "I just thought that if it happened, you'd change your mind." My breath hitched. My vision blurred. I felt like I was suffocating. She had done this on purpose. She had made a unilateral decision about both of our lives, knowing full well that I never wanted this, and just hoped I would magically become a different person the moment I found out. My stomach twisted in rage, heartbreak, and complete devastation. I had trusted her. I had built my life around a future that no longer existed. And the worst part? She didn't even seem sorry. She actually expected me to be happy about this. I sat there, staring at her, as the weight of her words crushed me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand why she thought it was okay to make this decision for both of us. But more than anything, I wanted to rewind time, to go back to before she said those words, before I knew the truth, before the foundation of our marriage had been ripped out from under me. My heart was hammering in my chest, my hands clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. She did this on purpose. That thought echoed over and over in my head. She had spent years reassuring me that she never wanted kids, that she was happy with the life we had, that I was enough. And all the while, she had been quietly hoping, no, planning, for this moment. She knew how I felt. She knew that becoming a father was my worst nightmare. And instead of talking to me, instead of telling me she had changed her mind, she took away my choice. She manipulated me into this situation, banking on the idea that I'd just come around. My voice was eerily calm when I finally spoke. "You knew this would be a deal-breaker for me." She looked away, her face pale. I could see the fear creeping into her expression, the realization that I wasn't reacting the way she had hoped. "I thought you'd feel differently once it actually happened," she admitted. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. I stood up, running a hand through my hair, trying to process the sheer betrayal I felt. This wasn't just about the pregnancy, it was about trust. About respect. And she had shattered both. I could already hear the arguments people would throw at me. "But it's your baby too. You should step up and be a man. She's your wife, you have to support her." But what about me? What about the fact that she had taken my future, my autonomy, and thrown it out the window like it meant nothing? If the roles were reversed, if I had gone behind her back and done something irreversible to her body and her future, I'd be labeled a monster. But somehow, I was supposed to just accept this? My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with rage. She was watching me now, waiting for me to get over it, to take a deep breath and say something like, "It's okay, we'll figure it out." But I wouldn't. Because it wasn't okay. And I wasn't going to figure it out. I took a deep breath, looked her in the eye, and said the words that I knew would change everything. "I can't do this, Rachel. I'm done." Her face went white. For the first time, real panic flashed in her eyes. "What do you mean, you're done?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. But I knew she understood exactly what I meant. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. I wasn't going to let guilt or pressure trap me in a life I never wanted. I wasn't going to be the kind of father who resents his own child, who stays in a miserable marriage out of obligation. I wasn't going to let her decision force me into something I had spent my entire life avoiding. "I mean, I'm leaving." My voice was steady, but inside, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump. She shook her head frantically, grabbing my hands, tears welling in her eyes. "No. No, you can't just walk away." But she was wrong. I could. And I would. I pulled my hands away, my body numb, my heart racing as I turned toward the bedroom to start packing a bag. She followed me, sobbing now, her voice rising with desperation. "You're seriously going to abandon your own child? You're just going to disappear?" I stopped mid-step and turned to face her. You made this choice for both of us, Rachel. You decided to be a parent. I didn't. She gasped, like I had slapped her, but I didn't care. I had spent years making my boundaries clear, and she had ignored them. She had assumed I would give in, that I would stay no matter what. But I wasn't going to stay in a marriage built on manipulation. I packed my bag in silence, her sobs echoing behind me, but I didn't let myself look back. If I did, I knew I might hesitate, and I couldn't afford to. By the time I walked out that door, she had collapsed onto the couch, face in her hands, whispering, "Please don't do this," over and over. But it was already done. A week later, I filed for divorce. Her family called me everything under the sun, a coward, a monster, an abuser for leaving a pregnant woman. My own parents begged me to reconsider, telling me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Friends cut me off, convinced that I had destroyed Rachel's life. But how is it fair that she got to change the terms of our marriage, and I was just expected to go along with it? I never lied about who I was. I never misled her. I was honest from the start. And yet, somehow, I'm the villain for walking away from a future that I never agreed to. But now that the dust has settled, I can't help but wonder, was I truly heartless for leaving, or was I just the only one who respected my own boundaries? Story number 2. AITA for secretly destroying my husband's business after I found out he was cheating. I, 36F, have been married to my husband, Daniel, 38M, for 10 years. When we first met, he was just another guy working a dead-end job, scraping by with no real direction. But I believed in him. I supported him financially when he wanted to start his own business, covering everything from initial investments to legal fees. I worked long hours at my own job to make sure we had enough money while he focused on making his dream a reality. And it paid off. Over the years, his small business turned into a massive success. It wasn't easy, I sacrificed everything to help him. I managed the finances, handled the logistics, and even took on tasks that had nothing to do with my actual job just to ensure he succeeded. I thought we were in this together. I thought all of that work, all of those sacrifices, meant something. Then, one evening, while he was in the shower, his phone lit up. I normally wouldn't snoop, but the preview message caught my eye. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." My stomach dropped. My hands shook as I picked up the phone and unlocked it, because of course, I knew his password. What I saw made my blood run cold. There weren't just a few flirty messages. There were hundreds. Photos. Videos. Plans to meet up. Conversations spanning over a year. My husband, the man I built a life with, the man whose business only existed because of me, had been screwing around with someone behind my back for months, if not longer. I sat there, scrolling through the messages, my entire body shaking. He hadn't just cheated, he had lived an entirely separate life behind my back. He had taken her to expensive restaurants, bought her gifts, even sent her money, my money. The money I had worked overtime for, the money I had invested in his business, in our future. I wanted to scream, to throw his phone against the wall, to storm into the bathroom and demand to know how he could do this to me after everything I had sacrificed for him. But as I sat there, rage boiling under my skin, another feeling took over, cold, calculating clarity. Screaming wouldn't change anything. Crying wouldn't undo what he did. But what I could do? I could take back everything I had given him. Every cent. Every connection. Every ounce of effort that had turned him from a nobody into a successful businessman. So I took a deep breath, wiped my tears, and got to work. I had full access to his business accounts, I had been handling his finances since day one. I drained everything I had contributed, the money I had personally invested, the emergency fund I had built for him, the savings I had foolishly put in our shared account to help him grow. I revoked my power of attorney on his assets, took my name off our joint business accounts, and pulled every legal string I had to remove myself from the company entirely. And then, I went a step further. I contacted the biggest investors he had been working with, people who had only agreed to fund his company because they trusted me. I told them everything. About how he had been reckless, untrustworthy, how his business was one bad quarter away from collapse. Deals crumbled overnight. Partnerships dissolved. And just like that, the empire he had built on my back started to fall apart. I played the role of the perfect, oblivious wife while the damage unfolded behind the scenes. I smiled at him over dinner, kissed him goodnight, and pretended like nothing had changed. Meanwhile, his business was collapsing in real time. Within weeks, investors pulled out, suppliers started canceling contracts, and key employees, who had always been more loyal to me than to him, suddenly started quitting. The cracks in his empire widened, and he had no idea why. Then came the final blow. I filed for divorce, taking half of everything. But it wasn't just about the money. I made sure the house, the cars, and what was left of his personal assets were tied up in so much legal red tape that he wouldn't be able to touch them for years. And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, his mistress, the woman he threw our marriage away for, dumped him the moment she realized his wealth was vanishing. I will never forget the moment he finally figured it out. The look of horror when he checked his accounts and saw they were nearly empty, the frantic calls to his business partners that went unanswered, the way his confident, arrogant posture crumbled when he asked me, "Did you do this?" And all I did was smile. "You built your entire life off of my sacrifices," I told him. "Now you get to see what happens when I take them back." He tried to fight it, tried to claim I had ruined his life, but I never stole anything from him, I just took back what was mine. Now, months later, I'm free. He's broke, alone, and drowning in debt. But people keep asking if I went too far, if I should have just left instead of destroying him completely. So tell me, AITA, for not just walking away, but making sure he lost everything the way he made me lose my trust?